thought the monster she was being forced to marry would be her worst nightmare. A warrior so brutal they called him Bloodless, a man who killed without feeling, bought like livestock to settle debts she never owed. 3 weeks until her wedding. 3 weeks until she'd belong to him completely. But on the night her uncle's hands trembled while announcing her fate, Astrid saw something that made her blood run cold. Not fear of her future husband. Something far worse. Something buried in her own home. Her mother didn't die in a riding accident 3 years ago. The horse was calm. The bruises were wrong. And the man who raised her, who held her through grief, who promised to always protect her, paid silver for silence. Now Astrid has 18 days to prove that the person she trusted most in the world is a murderer. 18 days before she's married off to a man who's been paid to keep her quiet forever. 18 days to find a weapon hidden somewhere in her uncle's room, a weapon still stained with her mother's blood. But when she finally confronts him in the darkness, when she looks into the eyes that used to comfort her and demands the truth, his answer will shatter everything she thought she knew about love, family, and how far someone will go to protect a terrible secret. Because the most dangerous lies aren't the ones we're told. They're the ones we live with every single day, sleeping under the same roof as the person who destroyed our world and called it mercy. The day Astrid's father told her she would marry Bjorn the Bloodless, she noticed her uncle's hands were shaking. Not from cold, though winter wind howled through gaps in the longhouse walls. Not from age, though Halvard had seen 43 winters. His fingers trembled against the wooden cup of mead like a man watching something die that he himself had killed. She would remember that detail later, when everything else made a terrible kind of sense. Her father, Olaf, couldn't meet her eyes. He stared at the dirt floor, at his own worn boots, at anywhere but his daughter's face. The smell of fish stew hung thick in the air, mixing with smoke from the central fire. Astrid's younger brother, Knut, only 8 years old, played with wooden ships in the corner, oblivious. The innocence in his humming made her chest tight. Bjorn has agreed to forgive the debts, her father said, voice hollow as a burial mound. All of them. The land disputes, the grain owed, the silver borrowed for your mother's, for the funeral rites. Astrid's throat closed. Her mother, dead 3 years now, thrown from a horse during a simple ride to the neighboring farm. A stupid, senseless accident that had somehow cost them everything. The funeral had been elaborate because Halvard insisted. My sister deserves a proper journey to the halls of the afterlife, he'd said, spending silver they didn't have on the pyre, on the grave goods, on the feast that followed. Astrid remembered thinking it was beautiful how much her uncle loved her mother, now that debt was a noose around all their necks. When? The word scraped out of her. 3 weeks, before the winter storms make travel impossible. 3 weeks. 21 days until she belonged to a man whose nickname came from the way he smiled while killing. Bjorn the Bloodless. They said he felt nothing when he took lives. No rage, no joy, just empty efficiency. Like butchering livestock. Halvard finally spoke, setting down his cup with exaggerated care. It's a good match, Astrid. Bjorn is wealthy, respected. You'll have status, protection. Your family will be secure. She looked at her uncle then, really looked at him, the man who had carried her on his shoulders after her mother died, who taught her to identify birds by their calls, to read weather in the clouds, to gut fish without waste, who held her while she sobbed through those first terrible months of grief, whispering that he would always protect her, always keep her safe. His eyes were kind. They had always been kind. But beneath the kindness, something else flickered. Something she couldn't name but felt in her bones like the moment before lightning strikes. I don't want to marry him, she whispered. Her father flinched as if she'd struck him. You think I want this? You think I want to give my daughter to him? His voice cracked. But we have no choice, Astrid. No choice. If we don't pay, they'll take the farm. They'll take everything. Knut, we'll grow up with nothing. You'll all starve before spring. There has to be another way. There isn't. Halvard's voice was gentle but firm, the voice of reason she'd trusted her entire life. Believe me, child, I've searched for one. I've argued in the thing, negotiated with other jarls, even considered taking thralls to work off the debt. But Bjorn's offer is the only path that saves everyone. Sometimes we must sacrifice our own happiness for those we love. The words sounded noble, selfless, but they landed in Astrid's stomach like stones in cold water. That night she couldn't sleep. The wind outside sounded like screaming. She lay on her straw mattress, staring at the smoke-stained ceiling beams, and tried to imagine her future. Bjorn's hands on her body, his empty eyes watching her across a table every morning, bearing his children, raising them to become like him, growing old next to a man who felt nothing. Her mother's face floated in her mind, laughing, alive, braiding Astrid's hair by firelight, singing old songs about brave shield maidens and clever wives who outwitted giants, teaching her that strength wasn't just in swords, but in knowing your own worth. What would her mother think of this? Would she tell Astrid to be brave, to accept her fate? Or would those green eyes flash with fury, with refusal to let her daughter be sold like livestock? A sound pulled her from spiraling thoughts, voices, low and careful, coming from the main room. Her father had gone to sleep in the corner he shared with Canute, which meant Astrid moved silently, the way her uncle had taught her for hunting. She pressed herself against the wall near the doorway, hidden in shadow but close enough to hear. Worried she'll refuse. Her father's voice, thick with shame and fear. She won't. Halvard, calm and certain. Astrid is a good girl. She understands duty. What if he hurts her? You've heard the stories. A pause. Long enough that Astrid's heartbeat became thunder in her ears. Bjorn will do as he does, Halvard said finally. But Astrid is stronger than you think. She'll survive. She always does. Something in that phrase made Astrid's skin prickle. She always does. As if survival was some kind of burden she'd already carried. As if her uncle knew something about her capacity for endurance that she didn't know herself. Her father's voice dropped to barely a whisper. I still can't believe it came to this. After everything with Sina. Don't. Halvard's tone turned sharp as a blade. Don't speak her name. What's done is done. The past is buried, Olaf. For everyone's sake, let it stay buried. Silence. Then her father's defeated footsteps shuffling away. Astrid stood frozen in the darkness, heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. Her mother's name, Signa, spoken like a secret, like something forbidden and dangerous. What's done is done. The past is buried. Her mother hadn't been buried. She'd been burned on a pyre, as was proper for a woman of good family, unless her father meant buried in a different way, buried like truth, buried like things that must never surface. Astrid pressed her hand against the cold wall to steady herself. The rough wood bit into her palm. Outside, an owl called, low and mournful. Somewhere in the village, a dog barked twice and went silent. 3 weeks until her wedding. 3 weeks until she became Bjorn's property, until she left this house. Forever. 3 weeks to understand why her uncle's hands had shaken with something that looked horribly like guilt. The morning came too fast and too cold. Astrid woke with her uncle's words still echoing in her skull. The past is buried. Let it stay buried. She'd barely slept, her mind circling those phrases like a hawk over prey, trying to understand what they meant, what they were hiding. She found Halvard outside, splitting wood for the fire. Each strike of the axe was precise, controlled. He'd taught her that too years ago. How to read the grain of the wood, where to place the blade for a clean split. He'd been patient then, guiding her small hands, praising every success. You're up early, he said without looking at her. The axe came down, wood cracked clean in two. Couldn't sleep. Wedding nerves. He set another log on the block. Natural. Your mother had them too before she married your father. Astrid's pulse quickened. You remember her wedding? Of course I was there. Gave her away, since our father had already passed. The axe rose and fell, Another perfect split. She was terrified, kept saying she'd run away to the coast, become a trader's wife, anything but marry a farmer. But she went through with it, found happiness eventually. His voice was warm with memory, almost tender. Astrid watched his face, searching for cracks in the facade, for any sign of the man who'd spoken her mother's name like a confession in the dark. Did she ever regret it? Halvard paused, axe hanging in midair. For 3 heartbeats he was perfectly still. Then he lowered the blade and turned to face her. His eyes were soft, sad, utterly convincing. Your mother loved your father, Astrid, and she loved you and Knut more than her own life. If she had regrets, it was only that she didn't live long enough to see you grow into the woman you've become. The words should have comforted her, should have felt like an embrace. Instead, they landed wrong, like a key that almost fits a lock, but jams at the last moment. What happened the day she died? Astrid asked. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. I was only 15. No one really explained it. Just that her horse threw her. Halvard's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. If she hadn't been watching so carefully, she would have missed it. There's nothing to explain. Freya was always temperamental. Your mother knew horses, but even the best riders have accidents. It was quick. She didn't suffer. Where were you when it happened? Why are you asking me this? His tone shifted just slightly from paternal to wary. Why now, after 3 years? Astrid forced herself to shrug, to look away as if embarrassed. I don't know. Maybe because I'm about to leave. Maybe because I want to remember her before I become someone's wife and forget who I was as her daughter. The explanation seemed to satisfy him. His shoulders relaxed. He picked up the axe again. I was in the village that day. At the thing, actually, arguing over fishing rights with Jarl Thorstein's men. Dozens of witnesses. When I heard what happened, I rode straight to where they'd taken her body. She was already gone. Dozens of witnesses. The detail was too specific, too quickly offered. Like a man who'd prepared his answer long ago. Astrid nodded slowly. I'm glad she didn't suffer. She didn't, Halvard said firmly. I made sure her funeral honored her properly. Made sure she went to the afterlife with everything she deserved. There it was again. That strange emphasis. Everything she deserved. As if her mother's death had required payment. As if the elaborate funeral was atonement for something. Astrid left him to his woodcutting and walked toward the coast. The fjord stretched gray and endless before her, water churning with wind. Gulls screamed overhead, their cries almost human in their anguish. She pulled her wool cloak tighter and tried to think. Her mother had died on a road between their farm and the neighboring settlement, a road she'd traveled hundreds of times, on a horse she'd ridden since Astrid was a child, and Halvard, who always accompanied his sister on longer journeys, who was protective to the point of obsession, had been conveniently at a thing assembly with witnesses. Too convenient, too perfect. She needed to talk to someone who'd been there, someone who'd seen the body, seen the horse, seen whatever evidence existed beyond Halvard's carefully controlled narrative. Old Ragna. Lived on the edge of the village, a widow who served as healer and midwife. She'd prepared Astrid's mother's body for burning. If anyone knew details that didn't fit the official story, it would be her. The walk took longer than Astrid expected. Her legs felt heavy, as if her body understood she was crossing a threshold she couldn't uncross. Once she asked these questions, once she invited suspicion into her heart, there would be no returning to the girl who trusted blindly. Ragna's house smelled of herbs and smoke, dried plants hanging from every beam. The old woman sat by her fire, grinding something in a stone bowl. Her hands were gnarled with age but steady with purpose. Astrid Olafsdotter, she said without looking up, come to ask about your mother. The certainty in her voice made Astrid's breath catch. How did you know? You have her eyes, and the same look she had when she was trying to solve a problem, like you're peeling away lies to find truth underneath. Ragna gestured to a stool. Sit, ask your questions. Astrid sat, her knees weak with relief and terror. When you prepared her body, did you notice anything strange? Strange how? anything that didn't match the story, that she'd been thrown from a horse. Ragna's grinding slowed, her clouded eyes lifted to meet Astrid's. Why are you asking me this now, child? After 3 winters? Because I'm about to marry a man I don't love to pay debts I don't understand. Because my uncle's voice shakes when he talks about my mother. Because something feels wrong and I need to know if I'm imagining it. The old woman studied her for a long moment. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the walls like skeletal fingers. Finally, Ragna set down her grinding stone. Your mother had bruises on her neck, she said quietly. Finger-shaped. 4 on one side, 1 on the other, like someone had grabbed her throat. Not hard enough to strangle, but hard enough to hold. The room tilted. Astrid gripped the edge of the stool to keep from falling. Why didn't you tell anyone? I did. I told your uncle. He said she must have grabbed her own throat in panic when she fell. That people do strange things in their final moments. He paid me extra silver to prepare her well, to make sure she looked peaceful for the burning. Ragna's voice was flat, emotionless. I was a widow with no sons. I needed that silver. So I kept quiet. Astrid couldn't breathe. The air in the small house was suddenly too thick, too hot, suffocating. Bruises, finger-shaped bruises, and Halvard had been the first to see the body, had been the one to explain them away, had been the one to pay for silence. There's more, Ragna continued, merciless now in her honesty. The horse, Freya. I saw her the next day. Not a scratch on her. No wild eyes, no foam on her mouth. Just a calm mare grazing in a field. That's not a horse that threw and killed her rider. Astrid walked back from Ragna's house in a fog. Her feet moved on their own, following the familiar path while her mind screamed in a language she didn't yet understand. Bruises shaped like fingers. A calm horse. Silver paid for silence. Each fact was a stone, and together they built a cairn over something dead and terrible. She couldn't go home. Not yet. Not with her face still showing everything she'd just learned. Halvard would read her like runes carved in stone, and she wasn't ready for that confrontation. Wasn't ready to look into eyes that had comforted her through grief and see a murderer looking back. Instead, she found herself at the old boat shed near the water's edge, a place she and her mother used to visit when Astrid was small. They'd sit on the weathered dock, legs dangling over the edge, and her mother would tell stories about the sea, about sailors who found new lands, about women who disguised themselves as men to raid alongside warriors, about the ways the world was bigger and stranger than anyone in their small village could imagine. You're not trapped by the life you're born into, her mother had said once, when Astrid was maybe 10 years old. Remember that, little bird. No matter what anyone tells you, you always have choices. They might be hard choices, dangerous choices, but they're yours to make. At the time, Astrid had thought she was talking about adventure, about possibility. Now she wondered if her mother had been talking about escape. The shed door creaked when she pushed it open. Inside, old fishing nets hung like cobwebs, and the smell of tar and salt filled her lungs. She sat on an overturned barrel and let herself shake, just for a moment, just long enough to release the trembling that had been building since Ragna spoke those terrible words. Her uncle had killed her mother, the man who raised her, who taught her to fish and hunt and read the sky, who held her when nightmares came, who was now arranging her marriage to a brutal man to erase debts that suddenly seemed far too convenient. Why would Halvard need her mother dead? What had Sina known or done or threatened that required silencing? Astrid forced herself to think past the horror, to approach this like a problem to solve. Her mother had owned land, inherited from their grandfather, good coastal land with fishing rights and access to trade routes. When she died, it should have passed to Astrid as the eldest child. But her father had been drowning in debts by then, debts that appeared right after the funeral, debts that required selling off portions of that inherited land to pay, land that Halvard had bought. To keep it in the family, he'd said, so Astrid will have something when she comes of age. Except now she was of age, and that land was still in Halvard's name, and she was being married off before she could claim it legally. The pieces were assembling themselves into a picture so ugly she wanted to tear it apart. But she couldn't, because it made perfect, horrible sense. Her mother had owned something valuable. Halvard wanted it. She'd refused to sell or sign it over. So he'd killed her, created debts to force the sale, and now he was marrying Astrid off to ensure she never questioned any of it. Bjorn wasn't just paying off debts. He was ensuring Astrid disappeared into a marriage where she'd have no power, no voice, no way to reclaim what was stolen. The boat shed door opened. Astrid's heart stopped until she saw it was only Thera, the blacksmith's daughter, carrying a bundle of dried fish. "Astrid, what are you doing here?" Thyra's round face creased with concern. They'd been friends as children, before Astrid's world had collapsed into grief and poverty. "You look like you've seen a Draugr." "Maybe I have." The words came out hollow. Thyra set down her bundle and sat beside her. They'd been close once, before social positions and family tragedies had created distance. But some friendships had roots too deep to kill completely. "Everyone's talking about your wedding," Thyra said carefully. To Bjorn, "I know. Are you... Is this what you want?" Astrid laughed, sharp and bitter. "Does anyone care what I want?" Thera was quiet for a moment. Then, "My father says Bjorn paid off debts worth more than your father's farm 3 times over. Says it doesn't make sense unless Bjorn wants something specific, unless someone convinced him you're worth that much." The observation hit like a blade between ribs. "What do you mean?" "I mean Bjorn could have any woman, wealthier ones from better families. Why you? Why so much silver for a Carl's daughter with nothing to offer but a pretty face?" Thyra's voice dropped lower. "My father thinks someone arranged this. Someone who needed those specific debts paid and needed you married off quickly. Your father talks about this?" "Everyone talks about it, just not around your family." Thyra touched Astrid's arm gently. "I'm sorry. I thought you knew people were questioning it." Astrid's mind raced. If the village was already suspicious, if people were already asking questions, then Halvard's plan wasn't as airtight as he thought. And if there were cracks, she could widen them. She could find proof. She could expose what he'd done. But she needed time, and evidence, and allies who wouldn't run straight to Halvard the moment she voiced suspicions. "Thyra, can I trust you?" Her old friend's eyes widened. "With what?" "With something dangerous. Something that could get both of us killed if anyone finds out." Thyra should have refused. Should have backed away, protected herself. Instead, she squeezed Astrid's arm harder. "We were blood sisters once. Remember? We cut our palms and swore we'd always protect each other. I haven't forgotten that oath, even if you have." Astrid had forgotten. Or rather, she'd pushed it away along with everything else from before her mother died. But now the memory came flooding back. 2 girls, barely 12 years old, sitting in this very boat shed with a stolen knife, making dramatic promises, while their palms bled together. "I think my uncle killed my mother," Astrid whispered. "I think he's been planning this for 3 years, and I think my wedding is the final piece. Once I'm Bjorn's wife, once I'm under his control in his household, I can never come back, never ask questions, never reclaim what was stolen." Thyra went pale. Astrid, that's not a small accusation. Halvard is respected. He serves on the Thing Council. If you're wrong, I'm not wrong. I can feel it. But I need proof. Real proof. Something that will make people believe me when I stand before the Thing and accuse him. You have 18 days until your wedding. I know. And if you accuse him without proof, he'll deny everything. Your father will side with him. You'll be labeled mad or hysterical. Bjorn will still marry you, but now everyone will think you're unstable. You'll have even less power. I know that too. Thera stood up, pacing the small shed. Her footsteps echoed on the wooden planks. Finally, she turned back. My father keeps records. Every transaction, every piece of metal worked, every payment received. If Halvard paid him for anything unusual around the time your mother died, it would be in those records. Tools, maybe, or repairs. something that doesn't fit his normal orders. Hope flared in Astrid's chest, painful and bright. Would your father let us see them? No, but he's traveling to the northern settlements for 3 days starting tomorrow. The records stay in his workshop. I know where he keeps the key. The blacksmith's workshop stood at the edge of the village, close enough to hear the constant rhythm of hammer on anvil, far enough that the smoke wouldn't choke the longhouses. Thyra's father had left before dawn, his cart loaded with tools and iron goods for the northern settlements. He wouldn't return for 3 days, maybe 4, if the weather turned. Astrid waited until full dark before slipping out of her house. Her father had drunk too much. Mead with his evening meal, drowning sorrows he wouldn't name. Knut slept curled like a puppy in his corner, and Halvard had excused himself early, claiming exhaustion from the day's labor. But Astrid had seen him through a crack in the wall, sitting by his own small fire, staring at nothing with an expression she'd never seen before. Not quite guilt, not quite satisfaction. Something in between, like a man who'd committed necessary evil and was trying to convince himself it had been worth it. The moon was half full, giving just enough light to navigate without a torch. Astrid moved through shadows, her heart beating so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. Every sound was amplified. A dog barking 3 houses over, wind rattling through bare branches. Her own breathing, too fast, too shallow. Thyra was waiting by the workshop door, a dark shape against darker wood. She pressed a finger to her lips and gestured inside. The door opened silently, well-oiled hinges making no sound. Someone had planned this carefully. Inside, the workshop smelled of coal and metal and sweat. The forge was cold now, but heat seemed to radiate from the walls themselves, absorbed during countless days of fire and labor. Tools hung in precise order along one wall. Half-finished projects cluttered workbenches, and in the corner, locked in an iron-banded chest, were the records Thyra's father kept with obsessive detail. Thyra produced a key from inside her dress. Her hands shook as she fitted it into the lock. The click seemed loud as thunder. "He doesn't know I made a copy," she whispered. "2 years ago, when I needed to check something for a customer while he was away. He never found out." The chest opened. Inside were rolls of vellum, some yellowed with age, others relatively fresh. Each one was labeled with a year and season. Thyra pulled out 3 from 3 years ago, spreading them on the workbench. A single oil lamp cast dancing shadows across the careful script. Astrid's mother had died in late summer. She scanned the records from that season, her eyes adjusting to the cramped handwriting. Most entries were routine: farm tools sharpened, a new axe head for Jarl Torstein, nails for boat repairs, 3 knives commissioned for a wedding gift. Then she saw it. An entry from 5 days before her mother's death. 1 iron spike, 18 inches long, sharpened point. Custom order for Halvard Eriksson. Payment in silver, double the standard rate for priority completion. Delivered personally. Astrid's vision blurred. She read it again, and again. An iron spike, 18 inches, sharpened point, 5 days before her mother died. What would someone need that for? Thyra breathed beside her. I don't know. But Astrid did know. Somewhere deep in her body, below thought or reason, she knew exactly what that spike had been used for. She just couldn't make herself think it clearly yet. Couldn't let the knowledge fully form. She kept reading. 2 weeks after her mother's death, another entry. Repairs to iron spike, blood residue removed, metal cleaned and resharpened. Payment in silver, requested no questions asked. Fee doubled for discretion. The workshop tilted. Astrid gripped the edge of the workbench to keep from falling. Blood residue. Her uncle had brought a bloodied spike back to be cleaned, had paid double for silence, had ordered the murder weapon prepared and then scrubbed clean of evidence. Astrid, Thyra's voice was tight with horror. We need to take this to the thing. Right now. Tonight. No. The word came out harder than Astrid intended. Not yet. What do you mean, not yet? This is proof. This is a record that my uncle ordered a spike and had it cleaned. That's all. He'll say he used it for building repairs, for breaking up frozen ground. for any of a dozen things that might leave blood if he cut himself. It's suspicious, but it's not proof of murder. Thyra stared at her. You can't be serious. I need more. I need something that directly connects this spike to my mother's death. Otherwise, it's my word against his, and he's a respected man on the Thing Council, while I'm just a grieving daughter seeing conspiracies where there are none. But even as she said it, Astrid's mind was racing ahead. Where was the spike now? Had Halvard kept it or disposed of it? If he still had it, where would he hide something that incriminating? We need to search his house, she said quietly. Are you insane? Halvard is there. Your father is there. Knut is there. Tomorrow night. Halvard mentioned he has to attend a council meeting about fishing disputes. It runs late, always past midnight. My father will be asleep by sunset if he drinks like he did tonight. Knut sleeps through anything. I'll have time. Time to search your uncle's belongings for a murder weapon while he could come home at any moment. Thyra's voice rose slightly, then dropped to an urgent whisper. Astrid, this is too dangerous. If he catches you, if he even suspects you know something, then what? He kills me too? Astrid heard herself laugh, sharp and bitter. He's already sending me to Bjorn, Thyra. I'll be married in 17 days to a man who might beat me, who might kill me in a rage someday and call it his right as a husband. I'm already as good as dead. At least this way, I die knowing the truth. At least this way, maybe I take him with me. The words hung in the air between them. Too honest, too raw. Thyra's eyes were wet with tears she was too proud to shed. If you're doing this, I'm helping, she finally said. Not inside the house. That's too risky for both of us. But I'll stand watch. I'll signal if anyone's coming. She swallowed hard. I'll testify to what we found here tonight, if it comes to that. If you need a witness. Astrid pulled her into a fierce embrace. They clung to each other like drowning people, like children again, making blood oaths they didn't fully understand. Except now, they did understand. Now, they knew exactly what they were swearing to protect each other from. They carefully returned the records to the chest, relocked it, made sure everything looked untouched. But Astrid had memorized every word of those 2 entries. They were burned into her brain like brands. She would carry them tomorrow night when she went searching through her uncle's private space, looking for an iron spike that might still have her mother's blood in its joints, might still hold evidence of the truth no one wanted to believe. Outside, the wind had picked up. Clouds were moving in, covering the half moon. It would rain before morning. Good. Rain would keep people inside, make them less likely to notice 2 young women sneaking through the dark. Astrid walked home through the growing storm. Lightning flickered on the horizon, still distant but approaching. She thought about her mother on her last day alive. Had she known? Had she seen it coming? Or had it been a surprise, a sudden violence from someone she trusted, someone she never thought would harm her? Had she called for Halvard as she died? Had she begged the brother she loved to stop? The questions burned worse than any answer could. When Astrid slipped back into the house, soaked from rain that had started falling in earnest, she found Halvard awake, sitting by the fire, waiting. You're wet, he observed. His voice was gentle, concerned. Where have you been at this hour? Astrid's mind went blank with pure animal panic. Then training took over. The lessons Halvard himself had taught her about hunting, about tracking, about reading situations and responding with calm calculation. Never let prey know it's been spotted. Never show fear to a predator. She pulled off her soaked cloak, shaking water from it with movements that she prayed looked casual. Couldn't sleep. Went walking by the fjord. I needed to think. Halvard's face was half in shadow, half lit by firelight. The flickering made his features shift between familiar and strange, like a mask that didn't quite fit anymore. Dangerous, walking alone at night, especially for a young woman. I've done it before. You taught me how to move safely in the dark. Remember? Something flickered in his eyes. Pride, maybe, or satisfaction that his lessons had taken root so thoroughly. I did. You were always a good student, Astrid. Better than your brother will ever be. You have your mother's mind. Sharp. Observant. Too observant sometimes. The last words landed like stones in still water, creating ripples of meaning. Astrid forced herself to meet his gaze directly, the way an innocent person would. Is that a bad thing? That depends on what you're observing. He gestured to the stool beside him. Sit. Talk with your old uncle. We haven't had much time together since the betrothal was announced. Every instinct screamed at her to refuse, to retreat to her sleeping corner, to put walls and distance between them. But refusing would be suspicious. Refusing would tell him she was afraid. So she sat, close enough to the fire that heat dried her wet clothes, close enough to Halvard that she could smell the mead on his breath and see the way his jaw clenched and unclenched in the firelight. You've been different these past few days, he said quietly. Distant, asking strange questions about your mother. Why? I told you, I'm getting married, leaving home. It makes me think about her. Wonder what she'd say about all this. She'd say you're doing your duty, saving your family, being strong. He paused, then added, she was strong too, sometimes too strong, too stubborn to see when she should bend. The words carried weight beyond their surface meaning. Astrid felt them settle in her chest like cold iron. What do you mean? Halvard stared into the fire. The flames reflected in his eyes, making them look hollow, empty. Your mother and I disagreed about many things toward the end. The land, mostly. Our grandfather's coastal property. She wanted to keep it all, pass it to you intact. I thought we should sell portions while prices were high, invest in other ventures. Diversify. She refused to listen. So you argued. We argued. He said it simply, as if arguments between siblings were nothing unusual, as if they hadn't ended in murder. The day before she died, we had our worst fight yet. She told me I was greedy, that I cared more about silver than family, that if I tried to pressure your father into selling, she'd make sure I never saw any of you again. His voice stayed level, almost conversational. She was going to cut me out of your lives completely, over land, over property that would have provided for all of us if she'd just been reasonable. Astrid's blood turned to ice. He was confessing, not directly, not in words that could be repeated in a thing assembly, but confessing nonetheless, telling her that her mother's stubbornness, her mother's refusal to bend, had forced his hand, that it was Sina's fault, really, that he'd had no choice. I miss her, Astrid said carefully. Every day. So do I. And the terrible thing was, he sounded like he meant it. She was my little sister. I raised her after our parents died, protected her, loved her. But she didn't understand that sometimes love means making hard choices. Sometimes you have to remove obstacles, even when it hurts, to save everyone else. Remove obstacles. Such a clean phrase. For murder. Such a neat way to package violence into something that sounded almost noble. Is that why you arranged my marriage to Bjorn? The question slipped out before Astrid could stop it. To remove another obstacle? Halvard's head turned sharply. In the firelight, his face was suddenly hard, calculating. The mask had slipped. What are you really asking me, Astrid? Her heart hammered so hard she thought he must hear it. But she'd come this far. Might as well see how much truth he'd reveal when he thought she was trapped, powerless, already defeated. I'm asking if you killed my mother for her land. I'm asking if you created the debts that forced my father to sell to you. I'm asking if you're marrying me off to Bjorn so I can never come back and reclaim what you stole. Silence. The fire crackled. Outside, rain beat against the walls like 1,000 small fists demanding entry. Halvard stared at her with an expression she couldn't read. Then slowly, he smiled. You really do have her mind, he said softly. That same dangerous intelligence. That same inability to leave things buried. He leaned forward, close enough that she could see every line in his face, every shadow. Yes, Astrid. To all of it. Yes. The confession hit like a physical blow. She'd known, but hearing it spoken aloud was different, was final, was real in a way that suspicions could never be. Why are you telling me this? Because you asked. Because you're going to be Bjorn's wife in 16 days, and once you are, none of this matters. You'll have no legal standing, no right to property, no voice in the thing. You'll belong to him completely. And Bjorn, Halvard's smile widened. Bjorn owes me several favors, considerable favors. He'll make sure you stay quiet. Make sure you never cause problems. Make sure you understand your place. Astrid felt something crack inside her chest, not her heart. Something harder, something that had been holding her together through grief and fear, and desperate hope. It shattered, and what rushed in to fill the space was cold fury. "You bastard," she whispered. "I'm practical," he corrected. "Your mother was going to destroy this family with her pride. I saved us. The land is profitable now. Your father isn't starving. Knut will inherit something worth having. And you'll be a Jarl's wife. Comfortable, protected, alive. That's more than your mother would have given you with her stubborn idealism. She would have given me the truth. She would have given me a choice." "The truth?" Halvard laughed, bitter and sharp. "The truth is that the world is brutal, Astrid. The truth is that good people die poor while practical people survive. The truth is that I loved your mother and I killed her anyway, because sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes survival requires sacrifice." He stood, towering over her in the firelight. For a moment Astrid thought he might kill her too, might decide that her knowledge was too dangerous, that eliminating her now was worth the questions it would raise. Her muscles tensed, ready to run or fight or scream, but Halvard just placed a hand on her shoulder. The same gentle touch he'd used 1,000 times before. The same gesture of affection and protection that had comforted her through years of grief he'd caused. "Go to bed, child," he said softly. "Forget this conversation ever happened. Marry Bjorn. Live your life. Be grateful that I loved you enough to let you live too." He walked to his own sleeping corner, leaving Astrid sitting by the fire, shaking with rage and terror and a grief so profound it had no bottom. She'd gotten her confession. She'd gotten her truth. And now she understood that truth alone wasn't enough. Not against a man who'd murdered his own sister and felt justified in doing it. Not against a system that would believe him over her. Not against a betrothal contract that would strip her of every right in 16 days. She needed the spike. Physical evidence. Something undeniable. Tomorrow night, while Halvard was at the council meeting, she would tear his belongings apart until she found it. And then she would take that evidence to the thing and watch him burn. The next day crawled past like a wounded animal. Astrid moved through her chores with mechanical precision, her mind counting down hours until darkness. Halvard watched her across the breakfast table with eyes that held something new. Not quite suspicion. Not quite satisfaction. Something closer to resignation, as if he'd accepted that she knew and decided it didn't matter anymore. Her father noticed nothing. He was drowning in his own guilt, drinking earlier each day, avoiding eye contact with everyone. Knut played with his wooden ships, innocent and oblivious, and Astrid felt a fierce protective surge every time she looked at him. Whatever happened, she had to keep him safe from the truth about his family, about his uncle. Some things were too heavy for 8-year-old shoulders. The council meeting was set to begin at sunset. Halvard dressed carefully, putting on his good tunic, the one dyed deep blue with imported woad. He braided his beard, fastened his cloak with a bronze pin shaped like a raven. Every movement was deliberate, unhurried, a man with nothing to hide, a respected member of the community preparing for civic duty. "I'll be late tonight," he told Astrid's father. "The fishing rights dispute is complicated. Jarl Torstein is stubborn and will need to negotiate carefully." Olaf just nodded, already half drunk. Astrid kept her eyes on the wool she was carding, fingers working the fibers with steady rhythm. She felt Halvard's gaze on her, heavy and assessing, testing to see if she'd break, if she'd give anything away. She didn't look up, didn't react, just kept working, kept breathing, kept existing in the moment until he finally left. The door closed behind him. His footsteps faded toward the village center. Astrid counted to 100, then 200, making sure he wasn't coming back. Her father had already passed out in his corner, snoring heavily. Knut was helping a neighbor's wife with evening milking. Wouldn't return for at least an hour. She was alone. Halvard's sleeping area was separated from the main room by a hanging curtain of heavy wool. Astrid had rarely gone behind it, respecting his privacy the way she'd been taught. Now she pushed the curtain aside and stepped into the space that smelled of him. Leather and wood smoke and something herbal she couldn't name. His belongings were meticulously organized, clothes folded in a wooden chest, weapons mounted on the wall, each oiled and sharpened to perfection, a small table with a cup, a whetstone, a knife for eating, everything in its place. Nothing to suggest the chaos of murder, the disorder of guilt. Astrid started with the chest, tunics, trousers, a spare cloak. Beneath the clothes, wrapped in oiled cloth, she found silver coins. More than a Carl should have. More than made sense for a man who claimed to be struggling with debts. She counted quickly. Enough to pay off her father's obligations twice over. Enough to prove that the financial crisis had been manufactured. But silver wasn't enough. She needed the spike. She checked under the bed platform. Nothing but dust and a forgotten boot. The weapons on the wall were all accounted for. Axe, sword, 2 knives, a spear. Normal, expected. She ran her hands along the wall logs, searching for loose pieces, hidden compartments. Her mother had once told her that the old longhouses all had secrets built into them. Spaces behind walls where people hid valuables during raids. Her fingers found it. A section of log that moved slightly when pressed. She wedged her knife into the gap and pried. The log section came away, revealing a hollow space barely wider than her hand. Inside was a cloth-wrapped bundle. Astrid's hands shook as she pulled it out. The cloth was old, stained, dark in places. She unwrapped it slowly, terrified of what she'd find, more terrified of finding nothing. The iron spike was exactly 18 inches long. Its point was sharp enough to pierce leather, wood, flesh. And at the base, where the metal met the cloth, were stains that water and scrubbing hadn't entirely removed. Dark, rust-colored stains that could be blood or could be anything else. Except Astrid knew. Her body knew. This was the weapon that had killed her mother. But how? Her mother had died from a fall, thrown from a horse. There were no stab wounds on her body. Ragnar would have mentioned that. So how had an iron spike killed her? Astrid examined it more carefully, turning it in the dim light. Then she understood. The spike wasn't a blade. It was a tool for leverage, for force. You could drive it into the ground, into wood, use it as an anchor point. Or you could use it as a lever. Press it against something, someone, with enough force to break bones or crush organs, without leaving obvious marks. Her mother's ribs. Had they been broken? Ragnar had mentioned bruises on the neck, but not damage to the torso. Because no one had looked. Because everyone believed the story of the fall. Because Halvard had been the first to find the body, had controlled the narrative from the beginning. He'd used the spike as a lever against her mother's chest, pressed until her ribs cracked, until her lungs couldn't expand, until she suffocated. The bruises on her neck were from holding her down, keeping her from fighting while the spike did its work. Then he'd placed her on the road, arranged the scene, sent the calm horse away, and ridden to the Thing assembly with his alibi in place. Astrid wrapped the spike back in its cloth, but carefully, preserving the stains. This was her evidence. This was her mother's voice speaking from death, demanding justice. She heard footsteps outside. Her heart stopped. It couldn't be Halvard. The meeting had barely started. But the footsteps were too heavy for Knut, too purposeful for her drunken father. The door opened. Astrid froze behind the curtain, spike clutched in her hands, trapped in her uncle's private space with stolen evidence and nowhere to run. "Astrid?" Thyra's voice, tight with urgency. "Are you here? We have a problem." Astrid pushed through the curtain. Thyra stood in the doorway, rain-soaked and breathing hard. The meeting was cancelled. Storm damaged the Jarl's Hall roof this afternoon. They're postponing until tomorrow night. Halvard is on his way back. Now. I saw him on the path. You have maybe 2 minutes. 2 minutes to hide everything, to make it look untouched, to get back to her wool carding as if she'd never moved. Astrid's mind raced. She couldn't put the spike back, couldn't risk Halvard checking and finding it disturbed. But she couldn't take it with her either. Not with him about to walk through that door. Take it, she thrust the wrapped bundle at Thera. Hide it at your house. Somewhere your father won't find it. I'll get it tomorrow. What is it? Evidence. The murder weapon. Go. Now. Thyra grabbed the bundle and ran. Astrid shoved the log section back into place, frantically smoothed the curtain, dove for her stool and the wool carding. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the tools. She forced them steady, forced her breathing to slow, forced her face into neutral blankness. The door opened. Halvard stepped inside, shaking rain from his cloak. His eyes went immediately to Astrid, scanning her face with the intensity of a hunter tracking prey. She kept carding wool, kept her expression mildly curious, kept every muscle relaxed despite the terror screaming through her veins. "You're back early," she said. Her voice sounded almost normal. The meeting was postponed. He was still watching her, still searching for tells, for signs of deception. "Have you been sitting there all evening?" "Where else would I be?" She met his gaze. Directly, the way an innocent person would. The way someone with nothing to hide would. "Father passed out an hour ago. Knut isn't back yet. I've just been working." Halvard stood there for a long moment, water dripping from his cloak onto the floor. Then, slowly, he smiled. "Good. That's good, Astrid. You're learning to be smart, to stay in your place. Your mother never learned that lesson. I'm glad you're wiser." He walked past her toward his sleeping area. Astrid's heart hammered as she heard him moving behind the curtain, heard him pause, heard the sound of the log being moved, checked, a long silence that stretched like pulled sinew. Then Halvard's voice, cold as winter sea. "Where is it, Astrid?" Astrid's mind split into two simultaneous tracks. One part stayed frozen on her stool, wool carding forgotten in her hands, calculating how fast she could reach the door. The other part observed with strange detachment that this was how prey felt in the final moments before a predator. Struck, calm, clear, already accepting death. "Where is what?" She kept her voice level, curious but not defensive, the tone of someone genuinely confused. Halvard emerged from behind the curtain. His face had transformed into something she'd never seen before. Not anger, not rage. Something colder, more surgical. The expression of a man solving a problem, eliminating a variable that had become inconvenient. "The spike, Astrid. The iron spike that was hidden behind the wall. Don't insult me by pretending you don't know what I'm talking about." There was no point in lying. They both knew. The only question was whether she'd die quickly or slowly. Whether he'd make it look like an accident or simply claim she'd run away in pre-wedding hysteria. "I took it," she said simply. "I have proof now. Proof that you murdered my mother. Proof that the blacksmith made it for you and cleaned it after. Proof that you've been lying for 3 years. And where is this proof now? Somewhere you'll never find it. Somewhere safe, with someone who will take it to the thing if anything happens to me." Halvard laughed. Actually laughed. The sound was worse than anger would have been. "Do you really think that matters? Do you think anyone will believe a hysterical girl over a respected council member? Do you think your evidence will survive long enough to see a thing assembly? Thyra will testify. The blacksmith's records will corroborate everything. Old Ragna knows about the bruises on my mother's neck. You can't silence everyone, Halvard. You can't kill us all." "Can I?" He moved closer, not threatening yet, just closing distance the way a wolf circles wounded prey. "Thyra is the daughter of a tradesman. Her word means nothing against mine. The blacksmith's records show I ordered a tool and had it cleaned. Normal, unremarkable. And Ragna?" He smiled. "Ragna is an old woman who already stayed silent once for silver. She'll stay silent again. Or she'll have an accident. Old. People have accidents all the time. Astrid stood, setting down the wool carding carefully. Her legs felt steady beneath her. Strange how calm she felt now that the worst had arrived. "You're going to kill me too then, just like my mother." "I don't want to." And he sounded almost sincere. "I raised you, Astrid. I care about you. But you've made yourself a problem that needs solving. If you'd just accepted the marriage, lived your life quietly, none of this would be necessary. Why couldn't you? Let it go? Why couldn't you be grateful for what I've given you?" "Given me?" Her voice rose despite her attempts to control it. "You murdered my mother. You stole her land. You're selling me to a brutal man like livestock. What exactly have you given me except lies and grief?" "I gave you survival." His voice hardened. "Your mother would have destroyed this family with her pride. She'd have kept that land until raiders took it or rival clans claimed it or taxes consumed it. She had no vision, no practical sense. I saved you all. And this is how you repay me?" Behind them, Astrid's father stirred in his drunken sleep, mumbling something incoherent. Halvard's eyes flicked toward him, then back to Astrid, calculating, planning. She could see him deciding how to handle this, how to make her disappearance look innocent. An accident, a runaway bride, a tragic drowning. The door burst open. Astrid jumped, expecting Thyra, expecting rescue. Instead, Bjorn the Bloodless filled the doorway, rain streaming off his massive shoulders. His pale eyes swept the room, taking in everything instantly. The tension, the positioning, Astrid's pale face, Halvard's predatory stance. "I came to discuss wedding arrangements," Bjorn said, his voice flat and emotionless. The door was unlocked. "Should I come back later?" This was it. This was the moment that would determine everything. If Bjorn was truly Halvard's creature, truly bought and controlled, then Astrid was finished. 2 men against 1. Girl, no witnesses who'd speak, no escape. Halvard's smile returned, smooth as oiled leather. "Not at all. We were just having a family discussion. You know how women get before weddings. Emotional, dramatic. My niece was expressing some concerns about the marriage." Bjorn looked at Astrid. Really looked in a way that made her realize she'd never actually seen him before. She'd seen his reputation, seen the stories, seen the violence and brutality that everyone whispered about. But she'd never seen him. The man behind the nickname. The person who existed beneath the warrior. "What concerns?" he asked her directly, ignoring Halvard completely. Astrid's mouth went dry. This was insane. She couldn't tell Bjorn the truth. He was Halvard's ally, his enforcer, the tool meant to keep her silent. Except something in his flat, emotionless gaze made her wonder, made her take a risk that was probably suicide but might, impossibly, be salvation. "My uncle murdered my mother 3 years ago, she said, voice steady and clear. "He used an iron spike to crush her ribs and make it look like a riding accident. He stole her land, created false debts to force my father to sell it to him. And he's marrying me to you, so I can never come back and reclaim what's mine. The spike still exists. The blacksmith's records prove he had it made and cleaned. And Halvard just told me he's going to kill me rather than let me expose him." Silence. Complete and absolute. Halvard's face had gone white, then red. "She's lying, she's hysterical. You can see she's not stable, Bjorn. She needs a firm hand, a strong husband to control these delusions." "Am I?" Astrid kept her eyes on Bjorn. "Lying? Check his hidden compartment behind the wall. See if the spike is there. Ask the blacksmith about the order 3 years ago. Ask old Ragna about the bruises on my mother's neck. Ask anyone in the village why a wealthy warrior would pay triple the standard bride price for a poor farmer's daughter. They're already questioning it, already suspicious. The truth is there if you bother to look." Bjorn's expression hadn't changed. Still flat, still empty, still completely unreadable. He turned to Halvard. "Is there a spike? This is absurd. You're going to believe a girl's ravings over." "Is there a spike?" Bjorn repeated, voice no louder but somehow more commanding. "Was there a spike hidden behind your wall that's now missing?" Halvard's jaw worked. "There was a tool, a building tool. She stole it. She's trying to create false evidence to avoid her duty. Show me the hiding place. I don't have to justify myself to you. We had an agreement. I paid you. Show me the hiding place, Bjorn said again. Or I walk away right now and the marriage is cancelled. Your choice. The power in the room had shifted. Astrid felt it like a physical change in air pressure. Halvard had miscalculated, had assumed Bjorn was bought completely, was his creature to command. But standing here now, watching them, Astrid realized something. Bjorn the Bloodless had earned his nickname not because he felt nothing, but because he felt too much, and had learned to bury it so deep that nothing showed on the surface. A man that controlled didn't take orders from anyone. Halvard led them behind the curtain, showed them the log compartment. Empty now. Proved nothing except that the hiding place existed, but his movements were stiff, defensive. Guilty. Bjorn examined the compartment carefully, touched the stains on the wood where the cloth-wrapped spike had rested for 3 years. Then he turned back to Astrid. Where is it now? Safe, with a witness. If I die or disappear, it goes directly to the thing, along with testimony from multiple sources. Bjorn nodded once, then to Halvard. The marriage is cancelled. Refund my silver. Halvard's face went through a series of transformations. Shock, fury, calculation. Then, finally, something that looked almost like relief, as if being caught was easier. Then continuing the performance of innocence. You're making a mistake, he said to Bjorn, but his voice had lost its certainty. A serious mistake. I have friends on the thing, allies. You'll regret crossing me. Will I? Bjorn's emotionless mask didn't crack. I've killed 17 men in battle, Halvard. Watched the life leave their eyes while feeling nothing at all. Do you really think your political friends frighten me more than that emptiness inside my own chest? The admission hung in, the air like smoke. Astrid stared at this man she was supposed to have married, this brutal warrior with his terrible reputation, and saw something she hadn't expected. Honesty, raw and painful and completely without pretense. Bjorn turned to her. The thing meets in 4 days. I'll testify to what I witnessed here tonight. To Halvard's threats, to his behavior. It won't be enough on its own, but combined with your other evidence, it might be sufficient. Why? The question burst out before Astrid could stop it. Why would you help me? You paid silver for this marriage. Halvard promised you something. Why walk away? For the first time, something flickered across Bjorn's face. Not quite emotion. More like the memory of emotion. The ghost of something that used to live there. Because I know what it's like to be sold by family, to be traded like property for someone else's gain. My father gave me to a Jarl's warband when I was 12 years old, traded his youngest son for fishing, rights and protection. I survived by becoming what they needed me to be, empty, brutal, useful. He paused. I won't be part of doing that to someone else. Not anymore. Halvard laughed, sharp and bitter. How noble, how touching. You think you're better than me, Bjorn. You've killed for silver, for land, for less than that. Don't pretend you have moral authority here. I don't, Bjorn agreed. I'm exactly as bad as you think I am, maybe worse. But I've never killed family, never murdered someone who trusted me. There are depths even I won't sink to. The words hit Halvard like physical blows. His face crumpled, and for just a moment, Astrid saw the grief underneath everything else. Saw that he actually had loved her mother, that killing Sina had broken something in him that could never be repaired, that he'd spent 3 years trying to justify it, to make it mean something, to prove it had been necessary. She didn't give me a choice, he whispered. She was going to destroy everything, tear the family apart. I tried to reason with her, tried to make her see sense, but she wouldn't listen. She never listened. So you killed her. Astrid's voice was steady despite the tears streaming down her face. You put your hands on your sister's throat and crushed the life out of her, and then you raised her daughter, looked me in the eyes every day while lying about how she died. How do you live with that? How do you sleep at night? I don't. The admission came out broken. I haven't slept properly in 3 years. Every time I close my eyes, I see her face, hear her voice. She called my name as she died, Astrid. Called for me to stop, begged me. And I didn't stop because I couldn't, because I'd already made the choice and there was no going back. The confession filled the small longhouse like poison. Astrid's father had woken at some point, was sitting up in his corner, face slack with horror. Even Knut had returned, standing frozen in the doorway, too young to, fully understand, but old enough to know something terrible was happening. "You'll testify to this at the thing?" Bjorn asked Halvard directly. "Confess publicly?" "Why would I do that?" "Because if you don't, I'll make sure everyone knows what you told me privately 2 months ago when you offered me this marriage contract, about how Astrid was the last obstacle to your full control of her mother's land, about how you needed her married off quickly before she came of age and could claim inheritance rights, about how you'd already eliminated one problem and needed help managing the second." Bjorn's voice was flat, factual. "I should have refused then, should have seen what you were. But I needed the silver and didn't care enough to ask questions. That's my guilt to carry. This is yours." Halvard swayed slightly, as if the weight of everything was finally too much. "If I confess, they'll execute me. Burning or drowning, either way I'll die." "Yes," Bjorn confirmed. "But you'll die with some shred of honor intact. You'll give Astrid and her family the truth. Let them have closure, or you can run and I'll hunt you down myself. Your choice." The silence stretched. Outside, the storm was passing, rain softening to drizzle. Somewhere in the village, a dog barked. Normal sounds, life continuing despite everything. Halvard looked at Astrid, really looked at her, maybe for the first time since her mother died. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I know that doesn't matter. Doesn't change anything, but I am sorry. I loved you. Love you still. If there'd been any other way." "There was another way," Astrid said. "You could have let her live. You could have accepted that you didn't get what you wanted. You could have chosen family over land, over silver, over your own pride." He nodded slowly. "You're right. I could have, should have, but I didn't. And now we're all here, broken by choices that can't be unmade." The Thing assembly 4 days later was the largest Astrid had ever seen. Word had spread somehow, whispers traveling faster than birds, and people came from surrounding settlements to witness what everyone knew would be momentous. The iron spike lay on the speaking stone, wrapped in its stained cloth. The blacksmith's record sat beside it. Old Ragna stood ready to testify. Thyra held Astrid's hand so tightly both their fingers were white. Halvard stood before the assembly in chains, not because he'd tried to run. He'd walked to the Thing of his own accord, head high, and asked for judgment. His confession was complete, detailed, unflinching. He explained how he'd planned it, executed it, covered it up, how he'd manipulated his own family for 3 years, how he'd been willing to sacrifice his niece to protect his crimes. The Jarls and council members listened in stunned silence. This was a man they'd respected, trusted, elevated to positions of authority, and he'd betrayed every principle their society was built on: family loyalty, honor, truth. The verdict was unanimous: drowning. The method used for the worst criminals, those who'd committed acts so heinous that even burning was too good for them. They'd tie stones to his body and cast him into the deepest part of the fjord. Let the cold water take him. Let him sink into darkness without the honor of fire or the possibility of reaching any afterlife. Astrid watched as they led him away. Their eyes met one final time. She wanted to feel satisfaction, wanted to feel that justice had been served, that her mother could rest now. Instead, she just felt hollow, empty in the same way Bjorn had described, as if grief and rage and vindication had all burned through her and left nothing but ash. Bjorn approached as the crowd dispersed. He held out a leather purse heavy with silver. "Your uncle's payment. The Thing awarded it to you along with your mother's land. It's all yours now. You're free." Free? The word tasted strange. What do I do with freedom? Whatever you want. That's the point. He paused, then added, For what it's worth, you're stronger than most warriors I've known. And I've known many. I don't feel strong. I feel broken. Strength and brokenness aren't opposites. Sometimes they're the same thing. He turned to leave, then stopped. If you ever need anything, send word. I owe you a debt. You reminded me that I'm still capable of making one right choice. That matters more than you know. Astrid stood alone as the assembly grounds emptied. The sun was setting, painting the fjord in shades of gold and crimson. Her mother's land stretched out before her. Her land now, bought with blood and lies and grief too deep to measure. Knut came and took her hand. Her little brother, who would grow up knowing the truth now, who would carry this story forward. Are we going to be okay? He asked quietly. Astrid looked down at him, at his trusting eyes and innocent face, at the future she'd fought for and won and didn't know how to inhabit yet. Yes, she said finally, we're going to be okay, eventually. And maybe that was enough. Maybe survival and truth and freedom were enough, even when they came wrapped in pain. Maybe her mother would have said that was all anyone could ask for, to live, to fight, to refuse to let lies bury you alongside the dead. The wind picked up, carrying salt spray from the fjord. Astrid breathed it in and let herself feel it. The cold, the clean sharpness, the promise of morning coming, always coming, even after the darkest nights. Astrid's story forces us to confront an unbearable truth. Sometimes the people we trust most are capable of unimaginable betrayal. She had to choose between the comfort of ignorance and the agony of truth, knowing that once she opened that door, there would be no going back. What would you have done in her place? Would you have had the courage to search for answers that could destroy your entire world? Would you have risked everything to honor someone already gone, or would you have accepted the marriage, stayed silent, and let the lies continue burying themselves deeper with each passing year? The hardest battles aren't fought with swords or shields. They're fought in the quiet moments when we must decide whether to speak truth that will cost us everything or embrace silence that will slowly kill our souls. Astrid chose truth, even when it meant standing alone against the person who raised her, even when it meant shattering the last pieces of family she had left. Her mother taught her that we always have choices, that we're never truly trapped. But no one warns us that freedom sometimes tastes like ash, that justice doesn't always heal, and that winning can feel exactly like losing everything. Her strength wasn't in being fearless. It was in being terrified and moving forward anyway, in breaking when she needed to break, and standing when standing seemed impossible. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the masks people wear and the secrets families bury, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to follow more stories that challenge us, break us open, and remind us what it means to fight for truth even when truth offers no comfort. Because sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is refuse to let lies define us, no matter how much easier it would be to simply look away.